The days and hours leading up to the NBA trade deadline are some of the most interesting in the league. With many teams scrambling to make late improvements to their roster or find new suitors for their players and contracts, it is a very fun and entertaining time to be an NBA fan, and this year was no different. We had pure chaos in the final week prior to the Thursday, February 9th deadline. And today we're going to be going over some of the winners and losers of this year's NBA trade deadline. The first winner has got to be the Phoenix Suns. While Phoenix has been playing a lot better after having a losing record through their first 45 games, it seemed pretty apparent that this team wasn't the serious contender they looked like last season when they won 60 plus games. But with the acquisition of Kevin Durant, that has completely changed. I think with Durant, who is a top 5-6 player in the world, it completely opens back up Phoenix's championship window and makes them a contender immediately. I mean, you have a starting lineup looking like Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Ayton, and somebody in there as well. And even though they gave up Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson as well as 4 picks, I do think the price was worth it, as this is their time with Chris Paul on the decline. If they're going to try to win a ring, the time is now. And I think this is just a phenomenal move to go out and get one of the best players ever. Moving on to our first loser from this year's trade deadline, and it is Durant's former teammate and running mate in Russell Westbrook. And Westbrook was traded by the Lakers in a 3-team deal with the Timberwolves and Jazz to the Utah Jazz, and I really just think this has signaled kind of the end of Russell Westbrook being a player of significance and him making a lot of money, as his next contract he will not be making big money, and he's likely to get bought out by the Jazz, which is good for him to see where he can go. But I don't even know how many teams at this point he can be a starting point guard for. He is still a talented player, but so hard to play with and really fit around, and he's not good enough to make those sacrifices to fit around him anymore. And overall, it's clear he is very much on the decline. The second winner, though, is the team that got rid of Russ. In my opinion, the LA Lakers were maybe the biggest winners of this entire NBA trade deadline, as they really revamped their roster, and I think they gave themselves a chance to make a run in the playoffs this season with really not that many assets to work with at all. And I think Rob Pelinka did a really good job. Starting with that Russell Westbrook trade, they gave up Russ and that 2027 first round pick, which they sent to Utah, and in return they got D'Angelo Russell, who is really having a bit of an underrated season for Minnesota in a contract year, as well as Jared Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley from the Jazz. Vanderbilt, a very versatile defender who can guard multiple positions, has length, and Malik Beasley, really a great shooter and a good scorer as well, can play off ball, and all those guys fit really well offensively and defensively next to LeBron. Vanderbilt, obviously it's more for his defense, but Russell and Beasley really bring needed shooting to the Lakers, and their moves didn't end there, as they were also able to acquire Mo Bamba and Rui Hachimura a bit earlier, which I think in itself was also a really good move. They gave up basically nothing for Hachimura, Kendrick Nunn, and a few second-round picks, which for a player like Hachimura is a really good deal. And Bamba, I think, is decent. I think Thomas Bryant is better, but Bryant did request a trade, and they did get a good replacement for him. The next loser is the Brooklyn Nets. They're in so much more of a worse spot than they were before, and they were a contender, or considered a contender, as recent as 2 weeks ago, and now they're just in a weird spot. They have a winning record, they're not good enough to tank, and they don't have any of their picks in the next few years, as those were all going to Houston from the James Harden trade. But they did get a lot of picks from Phoenix, which could be good down the line, but overall they're just not in a great spot, and they had to let go of 2 superstars. And really, overall, this trade deadline marks the end of such a disappointing era in Brooklyn Nets basketball, where they had so much talent, and they only won 1 playoff series while KD and Kyrie were with the franchise. Just extremely disappointing, and overall, they can't take a traditional tanking or rebuilding route because they do not have ownership of a lot of their picks for the foreseeable future, as those do belong to Houston, as we said, from the James Harden deal. And overall, they're in a really weird spot right now. The third and final winner on this list we won't discuss for as long because we are just coming off a video where we discussed their situation, but I do like what they did at the deadline, and that team is the Los Angeles Clippers. At the deadline, they let go of Luke Kennard, John Wall, and Reggie Jackson, and they brought in Bones Hyland, Mason Plumlee, and Eric Gordon. Now, John Wall really wasn't good this season for the Clippers, and it really didn't work out for him in LA, and Reggie Jackson was really inefficient. Even though he had some great games last season, he really just wasn't that efficient and wasn't that good overall this season. Luke Kennard is someone who's a really good shooter, but wasn't getting consistent game time with the Clippers with how deep their rotation is, and they brought in Mason Plumlee, who I really think will help as they badly needed a backup big, and Plumlee's quietly having a really nice season, or was having a nice season for the Hornets, and now he gets to go to LA. They also brought in Bones Hyland, who also isn't a very good defender, but with Bones you're getting bench scoring and someone who can play off ball as well and can hit tough shots and knock down threes. He's only in his second year, and the Clippers paid a really cheap price for somebody who needed a change of scenery and could give them a spark, and I also think Bones has some untapped upside and potential that could be shown with the Clippers, and he's going to be playing with better defenders too. That was another thing with his time with the Nuggets. It was hard to put him on the floor because he's a poor defender, and Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are obviously much better players, but you don't want them all playing together because that's three poor defenders on the floor at the same time. But when he's going to be in LA, he's going to be surrounded by guys like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Robert Covington, even Nicholas Batum, a lot of really good defenders, and I like this trade. Really cheap for the LA Clippers and a good pickup with some upside. And moving on to our last losers, and it's actually two teams, the Miami Heat and the Chicago Bulls, two teams in the East playoff race that didn't add anybody this deadline. Starting with the Heat are a team that have made the playoffs in consecutive years and have made runs in these years, and last season they played the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, and this Heat team is very talented with a duo of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Herro is having another nice season, but they need more scoring, and Kyle Lowry just isn't that guy anymore at point guard. There were talks of trading him, but they didn't get anything done, and I think overall they lack a point guard with scoring ability and really just more players who can create their own shot. Bam Adebayo has been very good this season, averaging 21 and 10, and he is one of the best defenders in the league. Herro as well has put up 20 plus, and Butler turns it on in the playoffs. But besides Herro and Butler, when he starts shooting threes and taking more outside shots in the playoffs, who is the next man up for the Heat? They need another guy to compete with these high-octane offensive squads, and I don't think they fixed that need this deadline, and I would not expect them to go as far in the playoffs as they have in some of their previous years. Moving on to the Chicago Bulls, this team is just kind of stuck in the middle right now, and they've chose to stay the course with their core currently with Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic, and if you're going to do that, you have to improve around them. You can't just stay in this place where they are right now. They aren't good enough to compete, and they certainly aren't bad enough to tank. And if you're going to do that, if you are committing, saying we want to win right now, you have to add more pieces around those guys, and they haven't done that, and they just continue to try to bank on Lonzo Ball and his return being the saving grace for this team. And they have been playing decent basketball, but they clearly aren't good enough to compete with the top of the top at the East, and they're in a weird spot right now. So there are my trade deadline winners and losers, a few of each. I do think some other teams who had good deadlines are the Dallas Mavericks. I do like the move, even with the crazy risk to get Kyrie, giving yourself at least a shot to go deep in the playoffs this season. With a talent like Luka, you have to help him. And I really like the moves the Spurs made, getting 4 second-round picks for Josh Richardson, as well as getting a first for Jakob Poeltl, who's on an expiring deal. I thank y'all for watching. Peace out, and comment below your thoughts on this year's wild NBA trade deadline. Like and subscribe.